Danish local elections are only a few days away, and there's one local race that's been getting national attention and maybe speaks to a broader shift across big European cities. That's, of course, the contest for Copenhagen. Will the centre-left Social Democrats maintain the city's Lord Mayoralty, or will they lose control, likely to a party further on the left? In this video, I'll take you through the local Danish electoral system, the context of this contest, introduce the four main mayoral candidates, and finally consider some polling. And so without any further ado, let's begin with some background. On Tuesday, the 18th of November, Danes will go to the polls for local elections across the country. Voters will be casting two votes, one for the municipal level and one for the regional level. In basic terms, municipal councils are responsible for schools and childcare, elder care, waste collection, public transportation, some degree of roads and infrastructure, and city planning. Regional councils are responsible for cross-municipal roads and infrastructures, as well as healthcare. This layout of responsibilities, of course, means that the majority of discourse revolves around the municipal elections that have a wider portfolio and that are more local and locally well known. There are 98 municipal councils and only 4 regions. Following the elections, municipal councillors will negotiate cross parties and form a local majority and choose a mayor. On the regional level, a similar process will take place and will lead to the selection of a chair. Both elections are run using a proportional representative open list system, where you can vote for a party list or a specific candidate on one of the party lists. Let's focus in on the most important and talked about municipal contest this year now, Copenhagen. Copenhagen, for historical reasons, uses slightly different terms than the rest of the country. They don't have a municipal council, but a city council, the Danish terminology being even more different. And they don't have a mayor, but a Lord Mayor. They also do have mayors, but that's a slightly different role, which we'll get into in a short while. The Copenhagen City Council is also by far the largest of any municipal councils with 55 seats, the second largest only having 31 seats. But anyways, Copenhagen has not ever had a Lord Mayor in the role's almost 100 years of existence that wasn't a Social Democrat. The Social Democrats being Denmark's largest centre-left party and in many ways the natural party of national government. The current Prime Minister, for instance, Mette Frederiksen, is also a Social Democrat. Historically, the Social Democrats have also always been the largest party in the council. That is until the last local elections, when they ended up in second place behind the Socialist Red-Green Alliance party. Though after negotiations, the Social Democrats managed to hold on to the Lord Mayor position, and Sofie Hæstorp Andersen took on the role, replacing Lars Weiss, a placeholder who had held the job during the election following the previous Lord Mayor's resignation following a Me Too scandal. But earlier this year, something a little strange happened. Sofie Hæstorp Andersen stopped as Lord Mayor and was given a ministerial job in the national government. Lars Weiss was again made caretaker Lord Mayor, and the very famous national political profile of Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil, who had up until then been a national politician serving several ministerial portfolios, was made the Social Democratic Lord Mayor candidate. This was very much a maneuver coming directly from Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, who had started to worry that Hæstorp Andersen would not be able to win re-election, and that a more well-known profile like Rosenkrantz-Theil just might. Now, something you can do in Danish local elections is form electoral alliances so that overhang votes from one party goes to their allies on election nights. And that's very much what's been done in Copenhagen, where 4 alliances have been made. The first is the centrist-ish alliance between the Social Democrats, the Social Liberals, and the Moderates, the other 2 parties' names being quite self-explanatory. The second alliance is the center-right to right-wing alliance between all these parties, more or less led by the centre-right Conservatives. The third being the obscure far-left alliance of a bunch of parties nobody's heard of, plus one that's gotten a lot of attention, which we'll return to shortly. And finally, there's the mainstream left-wing alliance of the Green Left, the Red-Green Alliance, the Green Alternative Party, and another minor left-wing party. 4 parties are running candidates for the Lord Mayorship. The aforementioned Social Democrats, which are running Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil. Then there's the Conservatives, who are running Jakob Næsager. The Democratic Socialist to Socialist Green Left Party, running Sisse Marie Welling. And finally, the Socialist Red-Green Alliance, running Line Barfod. But before we dive into these candidates, let's quickly look at the big political topics that have dominated this contest. The issues. The biggest issue in this election is also a multifaceted one, the cost of living in Copenhagen. That's general prices, that's prices for childcare, and that's probably most significantly housing and rental prices. Copenhagen has one of Europe's most competitive and expensive housing and rental markets, making it difficult for students to afford accommodation and for young families to afford housing. This at the same time that there is an ever-growing demand for housing in Copenhagen, from social housing, private rentals, and private ownership all alike. This is obviously a debate that also encapsulates the age-old conflict around whether to build more housing or whether to prioritize preserving green spaces and cultural heritage and preventing too much growth and development. As part of this debate too, there is a debate as to whether the municipality should go in and buy up private rentals and turn them into social housing, and generally a debate as to what the balance should be when it comes to the social to private housing ratio. And then finally, because this is the type of issue where a quick fix just doesn't exist, other ideas have been thrown around as to how to lower the prices to, in a sense, make the city more affordable, even if housing prices continue to soar. The most headline-grabbing one being a call to make childcare free. Don't worry, I'll tell you where all the main candidates stand on these issues later. I'm just trying to paint a bit of a picture here. The second big issue of this election is cars and the general roadworks. And this issue is kind of double-faceted. The first part is a question as to how much cars should feature in the transportation network, whether more streets should be turned to full walking or cycling streets, or maybe just bus streets. And the second element is around parking. Should there be more or less on-street parking, and what can be done with regards to underground parking facilities, or perhaps making more use of office parking that isn't used overnight. And finally, the third big issue isn't really all that much a local political issue, but it's one that's filled a lot of Danish and a little bit of international media around this election, the Israel-Palestine conflict. And that's because of this guy, Sikandar Siddique, the lead candidate for the Independent Greens, a minor party on the furthest left. Most Danes have very strong views on him, and I should mention that aside from his involvement with making this issue a big part of the local elections, Siddique has also faced several massive scandals this election. From accusations of drunken, threatening and harassing behavior towards a female colleague some years ago, to encouragement of disruptive protests outside the private home of the Prime Minister, and finally questions around his eligibility to stand due to him normally living in a different municipality from Copenhagen. I should mention this last point was investigated by the municipality and he was found to be in accordance with the rules. Okay, back to the point. He and his party have argued this should be an election about Israel-Palestine and have profiled themselves on very pro-Palestine and very anti-Zionist views. The party calls for a one-state solution and the dissolution of the State of Israel. This has especially manifested itself in one particular poster print that they've used, which reads, "Free Copenhagen from Zionism." This poster was met with a lot of criticism, with many arguing it was anti-Semitic, including by the Israeli embassy and the Danish Prime Minister. This has led other candidates to add tag-ons to their posters saying they'll fight to protect Jews, and also to the National Populist Danish People's Party and its lead candidate Mikkel Bjørn to respond with another poster print reading "Free Copenhagen from Islamism," which has met its own criticisms and accusations of racism and Islamophobia. But the Israel-Palestine issue has been running as a sort of B story between some of the minor parties, while the four main parties contesting the Lord Mayorship have been more focused on the first two of these issues. And so with that, let's turn to these candidates, taking them in alphabetical order, starting with Line Barfod. Line Barfod is the Lord Mayor candidate for the Red-Green Alliance and is therefore also the furthest left-wing candidate for the position. She's a former member of parliament and current member of the Copenhagen City Council, where she also serves as Mayor for Technology and the Environment, a title where she falls under the Lord Mayor and where she's effectively a committee chair on that portfolio area. She is running on a platform of building more social housing, letting social housing become a proportionally greater part of the housing market. She's not particularly supportive of free childcare, worried that this would mean cuts in other parts of the city budget. And on the great debate around cars, she prioritizes cycling, making more areas car-free, getting rid of a lot of on-street parking, moving cars to council-rented parking facilities, but well aware this will also decrease the total number of parking spaces available. In the last few weeks, she's been dogged by some revelations about her past and her ties to communist pro-Soviet organizations in her youth. This included serving in several official posts for a communist youth organization that promoted Marxism, Leninism, and openly supported the Soviet Union. That is, during the Cold War. She has also been caught up in a little housing scandal herself. The apartment building, in which she owns a property, received municipal money for a renovation from none other than the same committee that she is responsible for. And this does appear to have been a breach of the law. Barfod isn't the likeliest Lord Mayor post-Tuesday, because she'll struggle to get parties from the center-right on board with her, and because there are two other arguably better positioned candidates in the left-wing space. But before we turn to look at them, let's look at Jakob Næsager. Jakob Næsager is the Lord Mayor candidate for the centre-right Conservative Party. He's the only candidate right of centre and has been backed by all the other major parties of the right. He's a long-serving member of the City Council and currently serves as Mayor for Children. Again, kind of a chair position for the respective committee. He wants more housing construction, especially of private-owned houses, arguing the proportion of social housing is good as it is, and more private housing would help to mitigate further price increases. He also doesn't support making childcare free, arguing it isn't feasible from a budgetary perspective. He's a big proponent of cars and on-street parking, as well as building more parking facilities. This is actually in some ways the party's biggest wedge issue this election. And I do apologize if I'm treating him a little stepmotherly, but he's not going to be Lord Mayor. He is a candidate for the top job because it would have looked weird if all the candidates were left of centre. But he may end up playing a role in determining who the Lord Mayor gets to be. Let's now turn to a more serious candidate with Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil. Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil is the centre-left Social Democratic candidate. As I mentioned, she had a bit of an unusual selection process to get here. Before becoming lead candidate for the City Council election, she was a member of Parliament, and also having served as Minister for Children and Schools, and later as Social and Housing Minister, a role she's since been criticised for during this campaign due to her failure to supercharge housing in Copenhagen. It should also be mentioned that once upon a time she was actually a member of Parliament, not for the Social Democrats, but for the Red-Green Alliance. But she switched to the Social Democrats in 2008. She's also very good personal friends with the Prime Minister. She favours more housing construction of all types, but also stresses the fact that this is a long-term solution and won't serve as a quick fix to the cost of living in the city. Therefore, she is the candidate who's proposed free childcare in the city. She has suggested that this could be paid for with cuts to the bureaucracy, specifically by not replacing council retirees and perhaps also with a few redundancies, something all the other main candidates suggest won't work. She's also faced some controversy this election cycle, especially regarding support she's received during the campaign. This revolves around office space that her campaign has been given for free by Juden, Denmark's largest real estate company. This has drawn a lot of headlines and questions around interests and whether this would influence her if she were to be Lord Mayor, responsible for, among other things, a large degree of housing policy in the city. Rosenkrantz-Theil is going to struggle to piece together a majority in the next council that will support her to be Lord Mayor, but she's still probably the second likeliest candidate to take the post, leaving the likeliest, Sisse Marie Welling. Sisse Marie Welling is the candidate for the Democratic Socialist to Socialist Green Left Party, the party that's ideologically nestled between the Social Democrats and the Red-Green Alliance. She is also a long-serving member of the City Council and has since 2017 been Mayor for Health and Care, again a type of committee chair role. She's proposed the city buy up private rental properties, turning them into social housing, this largely to prevent the likes of BlackRock buying up rentals and pushing up prices, though this proposal has been criticised for not being legal. She shut down Rosenkrantz-Theil's idea of free childcare, arguing that that amount of money would be best spent raising the quality of childcare instead. On transport, she favours public transportation, but isn't quite as anti-cars as Barfod. She has also proposed the council renting office parking spaces that aren't used outside working hours, but the details on her plan are a little bit vague. She's also someone who hasn't avoided the harsh spotlight, with a whistleblower report surfacing in September detailing shockingly bad treatment of elderly people in care facilities, an area she is responsible for and has been for over 8 years. Details about how much she's known on the specific areas isn't broadly known, and a recent push in the council to investigate how much she knew and whether she failed to act was voted down with the support from the Red-Green Alliance. But the case has still been much discussed, especially last weekend when a series of Social Democratic government ministers took to the airwaves to attack her. But even then, she remains the favourite to break the century of Social Democratic dominance in Copenhagen. And to give you an idea as to why, let's hop over to polling. A couple of polls have been released for the Copenhagen area this cycle, and they all paint a pretty similar picture. Here's the most recent one. The Red-Green Alliance in first place, the Green Left in second, the Social Democrats in third, and the Conservatives in fourth. Now, the interesting thing here is that, according to this poll, there's actually the possibility of forming a majority wholly to the left of the Social Democrats if you factor in the single projected mandate for the Green Alternative Party. And that means the Social Democrats would have to wave goodbye to prospects of holding onto the title. But you may then wonder why it's the Green Left and not the Red-Green Alliance that's likeliest to take the top spot, considering the Red-Green Alliance are likely to take the most seats. And that's because the Green Left could, if it wanted to, turn rightwards. Probably not to the stubborn Social Democrats who have said they wouldn't back a government that isn't led by them, but perhaps to the Social Liberals or even the Conservatives or someone else on the right and find support there. That's something the Red-Green Alliance would really struggle to do, with the centre and the right thinking that the Red-Green Alliance are too extreme and dogmatic. Now, of course, this sort of contest between the two most leftward parties could always, of course, also benefit the Social Democrats in trying to put together a majority around the middle, with perhaps the Social Liberals, the Conservatives, or the Green Left. And that's why the immediate hours and days after polls close will be really interesting to watch. Who will negotiate with who? Conclusion. And that's it. A quick guide to the Lord Mayor's contest in Copenhagen. I think this comes at a really interesting time internationally. While there is a shift to the right across the world, there also seems to be a really sharp shift leftwards in urban areas, with the Mamdani win in New York and now another likely shift leftwards in Copenhagen. It'll be really interesting to see if this carries over to, say, upcoming elections in Paris and Berlin next year. Who do you think will win in Copenhagen? Who do you think should win? Do you think this is all a part of a general urban shift leftwards? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. I think that's me more or less done with Danish politics for a little while now, so let me know in the comments what else you'd like me to cover. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.